What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Weekly Dose of Dano TV. Here with your host, Dano, bringing you the best content that you're going to find on the internet. If you stay for 10 minutes, you're going to stay for the entire hour because we have Matt Jaskol live here with us on Weekly Dose of Dano TV for today. Matt, you are a NASCAR driver, stunt driver, skydiver, and many other things to add to your portfolio. But now you're on Weekly Dose of Dano TV, so you're about to get your next source of adrenaline and high emotions right now. So, Matt, what do you have to say to everybody before we get started for today?
Well, first, I just want to say thank you for having me on, and I'm already excited, man. I love the energy, and we obviously have a mutual friend, somebody that is very dear to me. I love her. She's always looked after me, Beatrice, and so she's the one who introduced me to you. And I just want to say thanks to everybody at home and anybody who's watching this right now, and hopefully we take you on a fun little journey for the next whatever it's going to be, hour or so, and hopefully some of the things I share about my life, very open-hearted and candid, touches on some people at home watching this, and people can relate to it and maybe help them with anything they're going any struggles they're having in life. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And that's really what we're always here about. We're here to help people level up in their own personal journeys, and just hearing your stories about, adrenaline and living on the edge and always having that mental fortitude in whatever it is that you decide to do. We're going to help everybody else achieve that in their daily lives as well. So don't go anywhere, because it's time for another episode of Weekly Dose of Dano TV. Let's get it, everybody. Oh man, I'm super excited to be here with you guys today with Matt Jaskol, giving you guys the keys and the golden nuggets, or I should say gold bars, to make sure that we're living our lives to the fullest and just obliterating whatever obstacle that we might be going through in our lives. And he's the perfect person that just embodies that with his mental fortitude. And, we're going to get to his story. But before we bring on Matt Jaskol, I just want to talk to you guys about a few things. The other day, I don't think I officially released this, but I'm going to release it with you guys right here, and I'm going to show you. I actually got on the cover of the Anointed News Journal, which is a publication here in the South Jersey area. And I just wanted to show you what the front cover is looking like. So yeah, that's your boy right here. And I'm just super grateful and excited just to talk about, my life story and the show and with everything with you guys, because it wouldn't be possible without you guys, my positivity posse. So I just wanted to say, look at what we did. This is the first of many achievements that we have, accomplished. And I'm just super, super grateful for each and every one of you, from the guests to, like I said, my positivity posse, for everybody to make this happen and just being a part of it, because I couldn't have done this without you guys. I mean, imagine if you guys weren't here talking with me live now. I would just be talking to a camera screen, talking to myself, kind of looking like a crazy person, right? But I just wanted to say shout out to you guys, because this wouldn't be possible without you. And this is just another victory that we can add to our repertoire and to our list of all the things that we might go through on a daily basis, and for the things that we don't really, share in public with other people. So like I said, I wanted to share that with you guys, because this is it's a really great feeling. And I want you to understand that this is not going to happen without resistance happening in our lives, because that's something that happens every day in our life. And we really can't see it. We can't, smell it, touch it, taste it, hear it, anything with the five senses, because I just feel like there's kind of forces that may be working against us, or, whatever you want to call it. Resistance is always going to be something, an obstacle in our lives. So when we make sure that we're doing everything that we can to fight it, whether it's, informing ourselves with reading books or looking at positive media, going to the gym, or just making sure that we're working on our mindset and our physical set, we are going to do everything that it takes in order to live our lives and accomplish our dreams and everything that we want to do. And like I said, this is just another testament of that. And it doesn't matter if you don't have a certain number of followers, or it doesn't matter if you grew up in a certain area in the world, or all of that stuff. Those are external things. And when you have that mental fortitude and that positive, personal development, you are literally just working against yourself. So if you are just feeding yourself with the great things and great energy and great pieces of media or whatever it is that you're going to do in the positive sense, there's nothing that can stop you. But on the other hand, if we're doing things that we shouldn't be doing, or just really getting distracted and getting off of our road or our path of purpose and our destiny, then yeah, things are going to seem like they're not working out for us. But always understand that everything is always working out for us, no matter how great, or even if we don't really see it at the time. If we make that intention and we say that the things are working out for us, even if we can't see it at the time, it will end up working out that way. And everything that happens in our life is meant to happen in the positive or negative sense. Whatever you want to take it as, everything is meant to happen the way that it's happening for us to reach our greatest and best good. And that will be my affirmation for today for you guys. What's going on, Matt Jaskol? Matt, what are you doing commenting in the back? You're supposed to be on the show. No, I'm just kidding. We're gonna bring Matt out in a little bit. And like I said, I'm just really grateful for you guys. Thank you so much for being a part of this journey with me, my positivity posse. You guys are the best. Thank you for dropping the hashtag positivity posse, Lou. Let's go. Let's go is right. You know what? I can't make you guys wait any longer, man, because Matt's story is absolutely incredible and really is the embodiment of what Weekly Dose of Dano is all about when it comes to, working on ourselves and really achieving whatever goals, your dreams. It is possible. And I know it sounds cliche, it might sound corny, but I've experienced it. I'm still experiencing it as we speak today, because we have other goals and things that we are accomplishing and going for. But Matt, I'm telling you, once you guys hear his journey, his story, you guys are going to want to go out there, get into your cars. Hopefully you don't break any speeding laws, but you're going to feel all of the great vibrations that Matt has to bring onto the show. So Matt, without further introduction, it's time to bring Matt Jaskol onto the show. Matt, what are you doing, Matt? Stop training for your next NASCAR race. It's time to get on the show. Hi, Matt, how you feeling today, man?
I'm feeling great, man. I got to be honest, genuinely, from the bottom of my heart. It was I had a little bit of emotions at times listening to you talk, because the parallels of your life and what you're trying to do definitely match with mine, and I'm honored to be here, man. I already see you. I don't even know you, and I know what you're trying to accomplish, and I love it, and I appreciate you having me on here.
Thank you so much, Matt. And like I said, it's so interesting how you can be on the other side of the world, literally, right, when you were doing Castaways, and right now on the other side of the country because you are in Vegas. But when we all come together just to make sure that we leave this world a little bit better than what we found it, I think that's when we can really, find our purpose in our life. And that is one of the keys to happiness that we're going to get into today. But you have done it in a completely different realm, in a completely different profession, which is, the NASCAR and being a professional driver. And let's talk about that, because it's not about me. It's about we, right? It's about us. So I know in your bio, you were talking about, in your early years, you developed a great sense or a great fascination for going fast and speed. Can you talk about that a little bit? When it comes to that fascination, like, did you have an innate feeling just ever since the get-go? Like, you just always wanted to go fast and find that adrenaline? Or did you have somebody kind of there to inspire you to go into that field?
I mean, I would say maybe a little bit of both. Great question, right? I think, of course, it always comes down to our upbringing, right? In my opinion. And my father was a boat racer before I was even born, and boat racing was one of the most, it still is, one of the most dangerous high speed forms of motorsports in the world, and we were always, we were just always a little bit different of a family, a little bit of a gearhead family, so, we weren't so traditional. Our vacations and holidays and, Thanksgiving, Christmas, whatever it was, we were out at the dunes riding four-wheelers and dirt bikes, and that was kind of just what we did, because I think my dad came from that. He was a bit of a fast-paced guy. My mother, she wasn't necessarily, but she supported it. She wasn't a gearhead per se, but she loved being out there and being a part of it, and letting the boys, my brother and I especially, do our thing. And so I started racing motocross at a young age of only 5 years old, and And I wasn't necessarily an adrenaline junkie. I wasn't, I wanted to go fast. There was a funny story. I was going down a hill at like 5 years old on a scooter, and I crashed really bad, and my face was all scarred up pretty good. And I ran in the house crying, and my mom goes, "What happened?" I was like, "I was going light speed," reference to Star Wars. And so, yeah, I mean, I wanted to go fast ever since I was a kid. But I didn't know where that would lead until I got older, until about 10, 11 years old.
Wow, I love that. And it's just amazing how even back then, if you were to have like a video camera of your mom, just you going fast, just it's kind of a foreshadow for your life. And I guess you could say that was your purpose even back then. And it sounds like you've always followed your dreams too, which is a big part of the story. Because not a lot of people follow that. They think, oh well, I got to get a job and I got to do X, Y, Z in order to not really follow my passion. But you stuck with it. And I kind of want to talk about that moment of when you first got into NASCAR. And a lot of people, when it comes to the NBA, I was reading a few things online and they say, oh, well, what was your welcome to the NBA moment where they have like somebody dunk on them or somebody cross them over? Matt, can you tell us, like, what was that moment that you said, oh shit, excuse my language, oh shit, I'm here in NASCAR and now it's time to perform to the best of my ability?
God, man. So without trying to take too long-winded of an answer, my journey into NASCAR, into racing in general, racing is a much different world, and it's not always so pretty either, to be honest. It's not always so, glitz and glamour. I mean, there's a lot of politics involved, and motorsports, if I'm being very open-hearted and candid, not trying, and definitely not being negative per se, like racing is a very financial sport. It's one of the fewer sports in the world that unfortunately doesn't always necessarily, talent doesn't necessarily guarantee you anything. It's an expensive sport. You have to have funding and money behind you, and I didn't come, my family was not rich. They weren't even, I wouldn't even say they were wealthy. My dad was a hardworking man on his hands and knees, quite literally, hardwood floor installer. We made enough money to go play, but then when it was time for me to start moving my career up in motorsports, if it wasn't for the fact that I got scholarships and I was signed to Red Bull as an F1 American development driver way back in 2004. If those things didn't happen in my life, my racing career would have stopped because we didn't have the money that it took to move forward. So I know we're sitting here talking about how I'm a NASCAR driver, but that actually happened very, very late in my life, so I'm actually I'm getting older in motorsports. I'm in my late 30s, so I mean, I was pursuing Formula One and was an F1 development driver for Red Bull, and then I raced in IndyCar and I in the Indy Light Series, and so my story in motorsports is it's a very journeyed story, of ups and downs, and where racing for me stopped for a long time because of all kinds of reasons. Call it financial, with the economic collapse way back in 2008, and then family setbacks. Father had a heart attack and took over the family business. That was back in 2015. So it's been a long road. My entry into NASCAR came out of nowhere, and I wasn't racing professionally anymore. I was just working in the motorsports arena, doing being a professional racing instructor, which is what a lot of semi-retired race car drivers do. If they're not racing a car, they're working in motorsports, or they're working towards working in Hollywood, being a stunt driver, because you can make a good living if you can get gigs. So I was just working in motorsports. I was actually also skydiving and doing some other stuff, and it's actually this company that you see here, autopartsforless.com, on this NASCAR. This is actually the NASCAR Truck Series, which I raced part-time last year. He was a friend of 20, and this is a good story of why we're sharing this, right? Is because it all ties into never giving up, relationships that you create in your life. So this gentleman, this friend of mine, who it was like out of a movie, especially if you know anything, even in sport, whether it's football or motorsports, especially. I was in Florida I was working as a racing instructor, for a program teaching young drivers in a series. And I get a phone call from a friend who I've known for more than 20 years. And I met him at a go-kart track when I was 15, 16 years old, working at a go-kart track as a racing instructor, working my way up in the ranks of motorsports. And he was just a pal. He was just a friend, and a Vegas friend. and we've stayed in touch for 20 years, and we've been pals. And then he created autopartsforless.com, and he had made it essentially. And he's still struggling to, he's still pushing hard and trying to create his business. He's a publicly traded entity, and he's trying to grow the company. He competes directly with companies like eBay Motors and things like that. But I get a phone call out of the blue in 2021. So it's still kind of like pandemic times. It was like February. And he literally says this. He goes, "Hey, Matt, I've always believed in you. I've always thought you're one of the best drivers out there, and I've always wanted to be in NASCAR as a title sponsor on a race car, and I want you to race for me." And that's kind of how it happened. And I had not been in a professional car in 10 years. You can't just go show up to NASCAR and be a driver. You have to either have lineage or be approved to race. So it was a long journey. It was us calling NASCAR and explaining my story. Luckily, I have a good pedigree of being a professional motorsports driver. And so they allowed me to enter a race where you had to still prove yourself. So the way NASCAR works is they go, "Okay, we'll let you race, but it has to be on a smaller track. So it's not as fast. It's on a half mile. You can't just go straight to Daytona at 200 miles an hour. You have to do one of the smaller tracks. And as long as you do okay there and you don't crash anybody, you don't look like an idiot, then they'll let you go to the next track and then the next track, and then until they sign you off and you're cleared to race." I mean, it's not just as easy as like, "Oh, I'm going to race in NASCAR now." And what it made it even crazier for us is it was kind of very crazy times. It was still COVID, and NASCAR was doing these COVID rules where there was no qualifying and there was no practice. So it's insane.
What?
It's kind of insane to think. I had not raced a car on a professional level in almost a decade. And NASCAR said, "All right, kid, we'll let you show up and go race. Don't screw this up." And I had to show up and get in a NASCAR that I had never touched, no practice, no qualifying, and take the green flag and not screw it up. And
Wow.
And I did. And I went out there with 40 other cars on a famous racetrack, one of the oldest NASCAR tracks in history. It's called Martinsville in Virginia. It's a half mile, famous track. And I started the race in 40th because there was no qualifying. I had to start dead last. And I thought, and I worked up to like a 20th place finish, which was a big deal for a low budget team. And then the rest is kind of history. Then I went and continued on, and all the races I did in 2021 were no practice, no qualifying. You just got to figure it out, go hit the gas and hope you don't crash, and yeah, it was a wild journey, man. And even on the first race, it was kind of, I was more nervous than I could honestly explain. I genuinely was. As much as I'm a professional, it's what I've devoted my entire life to. I was freaking terrified, man. And not terrified of like getting hurt or anything like that. You're terrified of screwing up and maybe not pulling it off,
Yeah.
And so it was wild to say the least.
I bet. And, Lou says it right here. Talk about pressure where you've kind of, worked up your entire life to get to this moment. It sounds like something out of a movie. I haven't done it for, 10 years. And now I'm just going to go straight to the big leagues. Well, for then, without having any practice and not having a real, super great team or maybe a super, a lot of budget to it because, it's just something about just that pressure, I bet. But, you worked through it and you just were able to fight through it. And now here we are talking about the entire experience. And Matt, I love the stories, but now we actually got to take a quick commercial break just to hear a word from our first sponsor. But we are going to continue more about this NASCAR talk because we have, it's not always rainbows and sunshines and butterflies. And Matt, I know there was something that happened to you back in 2021 that wasn't something that you can maybe foresee coming. And we're going to talk about how you bounced back from that, incident or thing that happened, because I don't want to give it away just yet. Everybody just stick around and we'll tell you exactly what happened after a word from our sponsors. So everybody like, share, do whatever you have to do to raise your vibrations, because we're going to hear from our first sponsor. Let's get it, everybody.
Takes a village about keeping our families together.
God bless this organization.
was our first sponsor. It Takes a Village Housing. Thank you for sponsoring Weekly Dose of Dano TV to make this possible. And go visit ittakesavillage1.org if you want to learn more information about how they're helping women and children in the South Jersey area. So thank you. Big shout out to them as well. Matt, when it comes to things that we can't foresee and time to really accomplish our dreams and to really find our purpose in our life, it's not always rainbows and sunshines and butterflies. And we'll be the first ones here to tell everybody watching, hey, there are going to be things that come up that we can't foresee coming. So I want to play one clip that I found online, and I want you to talk about how you bounce back from this, mishap or kind of maybe a setback or obstacle, whatever you want to call it. Just please let us know what's going on in this clip.
Okay.
And
I
think
you're going to play. All right. I may be.
But here it is.
Damage.
Let me just go back right here.
Oh, cool.
And that sign from the driver to safety officials that they are okay.
Pretty wild sequence of events there, Brad. I mean, the cars don't look like they have huge damage from certain areas, like no big hard hits, but it seemed like the wreck just kept going and going.
So in this
I
in
looked
this
up
car,
here as
you're
they
number
were wrecking off
13,
return
correct?
too, and you could see
I'm the number 13. Yeah, here we go.
Line.
So there goes Jesse Little spinning. Josh Williams spins to the outside, and then here comes Jaskol in the 13, and just so much momentum gets him up on top of the 78.
Dude, what am I seeing right now? I see your car on top of another car with all this smoke going on. Talk about, what happened, because obviously, it was a crash, I guess you can call it. But what was the road to recovery like? Was there any things that you had to bounce back from after this incident?
No, I mean, luckily, man, this was actually a pretty wild crash. I mean, it's so much tamer than some of the other ones that you'll see out there. Sometimes, I mean, there was a couple in my category, right? So for those that don't know NASCAR, there's only 3 professional levels of NASCAR. There's the NASCAR Cup Series, which is the top, which runs on Sundays. All the biggest names you've ever heard of, like Kyle Busch, stuff like that. And then Saturday traditionally is the Xfinity Series, which was famously known as the Busch Series back in the good old days. And that runs on Saturdays, where a lot of the same big name drivers that they'll run on Saturday as well. The car is very identical, very very similar, and similar speeds and everything. And then the NASCAR Truck Series traditionally on Friday. So I was racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series on Saturdays. We're doing speeds of no slower than 150 and upwards of pushing close to 190 miles an hour on some of the bigger tracks. And so this was an interesting situation. So this is one of the gnarliest, coolest, famous tracks. It's actually called the Monster Mile. It's in Dover, Delaware, and as you can see, it's a monster. I mean, it's a super fast track. I mean, we're doing about like 175 miles an hour, and once again, so luckily this wasn't my fault, So there was an interview that I did, and I was very upset because the car got damaged, and luckily the race team that I raced for, my sponsor wasn't responsible for crash damage, which a lot of times drivers sponsorship, there was probably over $10,000 in crash damage in that situation. The car that I landed on top of, it destroyed that car because the weight of my car crushed the roll cage, making the car worthless. That was probably $100,000 loss for that team. I mean, these are big budgets, man. It's wild out there. And so I got hit from behind, and that's what spun me around and then put me over. And I got to say, as I was going backwards, and it's not a movie I necessarily love, but I've grown to love it, is Talladega. Everybody always cites Talladega Nights, and it's hilarious. And I was like, I'm going backwards. It's not good. It's not good. and then I'm going through the air, and I was like, this is not good. So what's, again, as a driver, what gets, I wasn't hurt. I was not injured whatsoever. I mean, the cars are pretty amazing. It was if you show the video again, there's another angle where the back of the car is like 15 feet in the air. And so I got very lucky that it wasn't more painful or more damage or anything. And I bounced back from it just fine. But it was one of those situations where that was only my 3rd NASCAR race ever. And I was having a good race, a good run. And we get hit. We get hit from behind from somebody that so there's a crash that happens in front of us. As you see, I slow down as I should, and I slow down. Here's the hit, and then it was a pretty good boom. I mean, luckily I hit backwards, felt it a little bit in my back, but it wasn't too bad. And But yeah, it was the cause of somebody else driving into the back of us that spun us around. And so again, remember I talked about NASCAR has a system where they approve you to go to the next race. So I did a half mile. And then I went to Darlington, which is actually one of the most difficult NASCAR tracks in history. And I did very well there. But then Dover was kind of like, I got thrown into it, wasn't sure I was going to be doing it. Again, no practice. It was, I mean, one of the most difficult tracks in NASCAR. And you got to understand, like, there's 40 cars on the track. And if you understand racing, there's dirty air. So the car like moves around and doesn't have downforce sometimes. And I had to go straight to the green flag. You're full throttle by lap 2, hitting 170 plus miles an hour. And you're just like, I don't know how the car is going to handle, what's going to happen. And so when I crashed, I was more upset that NASCAR was going to be like, well, do we approve him to the next race? And luckily NASCAR looks at everything and all the footage and like, okay, he was doing a good job. This wasn't his fault. He got hit from behind. No harm, no foul. Let's let him go to the next race. And luckily we had sponsorship. The damage wasn't too bad. Like for as bad as it looks, the damage wasn't too bad. And there's multiple cars. A NASCAR team has, even a low budget team they have to have like 4 or 5 different cars because you use a different car for different style tracks. You have a road course car, a short track car, a mid track car, a mile and a half car, a super speedway car. I mean, there's more involved. NASCAR is far more complex than anybody would really understand if they're not involved in motorsports. And so again, luckily we were able to go on to the next race and I had a solid partial season, as you would say, since I was racing part-time.
Of course, man. And, thank God that you're okay, that you were able to continue everything that you have going on, because there's things that you don't even know, that we still have coming about in our lives. And thank God, like I said, that you are okay to make sure that you are able to achieve all those great things. And I know one of the things that we're going to be talking about in the next segment is going to be the Castaways, series that you've done, where you went to, remote island for about 41 days or 42 days? 42 days by yourself. And just to give you guys a little bit of information about that, Castaways is, you go in by yourself on a remote island and you have the opportunity that you're close enough with the next person next to you to say, hey, well, let's work together to, make it through the day, or make it through the entire 42 days, or you can just say, you know what, I'm going to do this by myself. And Matt actually had the chance to go do that. So stick around and we're going to be talking about that in the next segment. But I want to talk about what you just mentioned, and it was driving speeds up to 175 miles an hour. When you're going that fast, does that seem like do you seem like you're in flow at that time, where everything is just, peaceful and you're just accustomed to that, and that's where, you feel that you need to be? Or can you describe the feelings going 175 miles an hour?
I love what you said, flow. Yes, you are in like a flow state, but it is certainly not calm by any means, right? I'll tell you this. So like Vegas, I've got to race my hometown race twice, 3 times. I did 2 Xfinity races, 2021, 2022, and then I raced the NASCAR truck as well. And those speeds are about 108, let's say 185, 190 miles an hour in the draft, like top speed. You're cruising around 185 miles an hour.
Cruising.
Cruising. And again, there's so much to it. There's other cars on track, 40 of them. There's dirty air, there's track conditions, there's crashes happening, there's tire degradation. So as you're driving, the tires are getting worse and worse and worse. So the car might start to slide around and start to act different and start to, might not turn as well, might get loose. I mean, things are changing. So you do get into a flow state where you're just kind of in a rhythm. You're in the zone, but things are constantly happening and changing. And I wish I had footage to show you the crashes that have happened in front of me at 185 miles an hour. And it's hard. I've even learned a lot racing in NASCAR, where I'll watch stuff on TV, even as a racing driver. And I might criticize the driver and say, he made a mistake. But you know what? You don't understand how fast things are happening. I don't even know how to describe it. It's very cool. Like when you're in a corner and there's, 20 other, you're in the middle of the pack. There's 20 cars behind you. There's 20 cars in front of you. You're all doing 185 miles an hour. Everything is like moving so quick that your eyes can barely, see. And when something happens, you might not even have time to react. You might even get, you might get praised for saving it, and you're like, I got lucky. Shit, I got lucky in that situation. I was just moving in the right place at the right time. And then sometimes there is a lot of talent involved, and sometimes you run out of talent and maybe you get caught up in a crash, But yeah, if you're by yourself, that is kind of a beautiful thing. If you're by yourself, doing a qualifying run or something like that, you are kind of in this flow state where things are just clicking along, and your body and your mind get used to it, right? So this maybe on lap 1, you're like, whoa, things are fast. And then your body adjusts, right? So like on the first time I raced a NASCAR truck series, it was at one of my first races was in a track at Atlanta. And Atlanta's called a super speedway now because they've changed the track. It's flat out, full throttle, about 190 miles an hour. And you're just holding the throttle flat out. And again, things are just moving so quick. And in the first couple laps, you're just like, oh my God. And then after 5 laps, you're kind of like, yes, let's go. You know, you're just kind of in it and you're enjoying it and you're settling in and everything. But yeah, so you're definitely not comfortable per se, but I don't know how to describe it. It's hard to explain.
Yeah, I bet. And, you know, just the passion and the smiles and the way that you're talking about it, you can tell that you were born for this and that you've been doing this ever since you were a little kid as well. But like I said, I'm just really grateful, and everybody in the Positivity Posse is grateful that you made it through. You got to learn the experience, and you were still able to, you know, keep going forward and really achieving, going along with your dreams and your goals as well. We actually have 2 questions that we're going to get to later about it. So I'm going to star them, but we're going to get back to Matt's, you know, NASCAR career, but we got to hear one more. Well, we have to hear a word from our sponsor again. So we're going to play another commercial. And remember, everybody, like, share, and keep the high positive vibrations going, because you can just hear it in Matt's voice. So we're going to be talking about Castaways. If you want, in this next minute, do your research, do your homework, because we're going to be back after 1 minute after word from our sponsors. Thank you to our second sponsor for sponsoring Weekly Dose of Dano TV, the Elks Lodge in the South Jersey area as well. Thank you so much, guys, for making this possible, because it wouldn't be possible without you guys. And special shout out to my Positivity Posse as well. So Matt, now we're going to talk about this. I think this is going to be the most interesting part of everything. I mean, I know I guess that's subjective, right? Because, you know, somebody could say NASCAR is interesting, or, you know, the future projects that we're going to be talking about later that you have coming up are interesting. But I'm really curious about this, because I've always seen, you know, Discovery Channel where it's like Naked and Afraid or Man versus Wild. But in this case, it's your show with Castaways on ABC. And I always thought that, you know, maybe with a little bit more knowledge, I could always survive, you know, in the wild by myself in a remote island. But you're going to tell us, you know, if that's really true, or, you know, if most people can do it, if they can't. Well, we're going to get to that. So Matt, tell us a little bit about your experience and the background of what Castaways is and how you got involved, or why you wanted to get involved with the show.
Okay, so we have like 6 more hours, so I can. So I'll do the best I can to make a very, very long story long, as a good friend of mine always says, and so, but jokingly, I'll make it as short as possible. But so you got to understand, like, so my NASCAR journey, that didn't start until 2021, and Castaways goes back to 2017 when I first got the phone call. It's it's 5 years ago now, and how it kind of came about was, again, you know, life had taken a dramatic turn, you know. So I was working as a professional racing instructor, and you know, constantly doing what a lot of racing drivers do, which is just grind and try to find sponsorship and hopefully go racing professionally, and it just wasn't very realistic for me, you know, because of some family setbacks and choices that I made. My father had a heart attack and open heart surgery, triple bypass, survived, and I was working as the chief instructor of a racing school in Vegas, and I wasn't happy. I genuinely was not happy. You know, I wouldn't go as far as saying I was depressed, but I wasn't happy with life. It wasn't where I wanted to be, you know, and as much as people saw like, oh, you're working at a racetrack and race cars, exotic cars must be so cool. I was grateful that I had a good, cool, unique job. But how how I always related it to people is like, imagine you're a baseball player and you're a badass. You can throw a 100-mile-an-hour fastball. You could be on any major league team and hold your own, but you can't, but there's no spot. You can't get a contract. And imagine you're working at a batting cage. Do you think that guy would be happy? Of course not. It's not what you devoted your life to do. It's like, no. And that's kind of what I equated it to. It's like, it's not where I wanted to be. I didn't want to be sitting, on a bench, or at the Las Vegas Motor Speedway, working at a driving experience. Again, I was grateful for the job, but it wasn't what I wanted to be doing with my life. And so I was already kind of like not really happy, and racing was the window was slowly closing. It didn't look like being in a professional race car was going to be realistic. And then my dad has a heart attack. My father has a heart attack, and he had a small wood business that supported him and supported my mother and even supported me at times. My family is the reason I even have a roof over my head. It's let's be real, right? It's not like I made $1 million in motorsports and bought my own home. It's because of family and life and journey, and we've all helped each. My family has worked together to have the little that we have. And so when my father had the heart attack, I quit my job. I quit all of motorsports, and I took over a wood business, that was failing. It was going to go bankrupt without him. And
Wow.
And so I dove right in, and that was a pretty wild journey. And that was like 2016 into 2017, running this wood business I knew nothing about, and slowly, and I was proud. I was doing what I thought was the right thing to do, was to help my father and my family, who gave me an amazing life. And now they were having a hard time. So I stepped in like I thought anybody should do. And it was actually hurt. It honestly hurt sometimes. People would say, oh man, it's so amazing you did that. And I genuinely was like, isn't this what you do?
Yeah.
My
Well,
parents,
that's because of your upbringing, that's why you thought that. But somebody else would be like, I'm just going to go do what's best for me and not,
yeah.
not-
It was actually kind of sad to hear other people say, man, some people might say, sorry, Pop, sorry, I have a business. I have my own thing going on. I can't help you,
Yeah.
So I'm grateful that I was in a life situation where I was making good money. I was living a decent life. And I wasn't necessarily happy, wasn't doing exactly what I wanted, but I was doing all right. And I had started skydiving, which is a whole nother story that we can try to touch on. But so anyways, I take over the family business. I'm out of motorsports. I'm not really doing much. And then I get a phone call from a friend through motorsports, of course. And he goes, hey, my daughter-in-law is casting for a big TV show. And she wants to, she asked if I knew anybody interesting. And so I recommended you. And I was dealing with a lot. I was taking care of my mother, my father, even helping my older brother. I was not in a good situation in life. Things were pretty wild. And I said, listen, I don't have time for this. I'm not interested. It's not that, Castaways is nothing I applied for, And so he said, will you please just talk to her and humor her for a minute? Okay, fine. I'll go talk to her. So I get on the phone with her and she goes, okay, I can't tell you what network. It was all very cryptic. She's like, I can't tell you what network. I can't really explain it. Blah, blah, blah. It's going to be the greatest thing of your life. It could change your life and you get to tell your life story. But it involves surviving on a deserted jungle island for up to 2 months without food or shelter. And
when you said sign me up, I bet, right?
No, man, I did not. I said, you got the wrong guy. Okay. I'm a city boy race car driver. I got a pedicure once because I was, I was taking care of myself one day. Like, I was like, no, you got the wrong guy. I have no desire to go starve in a jungle. As much as I'm adventurous, I was like, I'm not, I can't do that. And then she goes, I think, and then of course, again, make a very long story short, they were kind of like, well, we think you can, and you should consider this. And one thing led to another, and I said yes. And I said yes mostly because I went to my parents as well. I went to my family and I said, listen, I got a weird offer. And by then I knew that it was ABC and it was like created by the same guy that created Alone on History Channel, and that it wasn't going to be a competition or a game show. It was going to be more like a documentary and social experiment.
Okay.
And so I went to my family and I said, listen, I got this offer to go do this. What do you think? And you got to understand, at the time, I'm taking care of the family. I'm taking care of my mother, my father. I'm running the business. Leaving for 2 months could be detrimental, and they said, and they looked at me and they said, we think you should do this. And I was kind of like,
Oh.
oh shit.
I didn't want to hear that. I didn't want to go in the beginning, right?
I genuinely was looking for an excuse. I was looking for an excuse to not go, and looking to say, oh, my parents, you know, I got to take care of them, so I can't do it. And then when they looked at me and said, we don't want to hold you back, we think you should do this, I was like, oh, okay, shit, I got to go do this. So I did it. And at first I said, you know, I just want to go see what it's like. I do want to go, you know, get dropped in a jungle and see how I would behave. What would I do? How would I feel? And you know, maybe I'll just stay for a couple weeks. And you know, again, it's a very long story of how and why. And I learned the difference between having a how and having a why, you know, and
yeah. And, you know, I want to talk about something that you just said, not trying to cut you off, but, you know, there's so much that we have to cover in this, this story. You know, as you just mentioned earlier, you just said literally you went out there to go starve. Can you talk a little bit about this picture and how it makes you feel when you actually see this picture right now?
Yeah, no, man. I mean, I get emotional even to this day, you know, nobody will ever truly, and that was such a real photo, man. Like, we had just gotten rescued hours, maybe 5-6 hours earlier. I had already been eating for a couple hours. I mean, God, man, look at that. You know, I had lost 32 pounds. The stare, the long stare that you see, it was actually a Purple Heart Vietnam vet who was a dear friend and mentor of mine in motorsports, funny enough, who passed away a few years ago. And luckily he was around when I came home. And this guy, he was a Purple Heart, man. This guy got shot in Vietnam, was a wild, you know, genius man. And he called me after he saw this photo, and he goes, you had the long stare, man. You went through some shit out there, didn't you? And that was from a vet, which was so cool, you know, because I didn't think I did anything noble. And he was like, no, what you did was pretty amazing. Be proud of yourself. So if you see the mirror, there's a mirror behind me. All right. And so funny thing about living in a jungle for 42 days, I had no idea what I looked like. And even when they rescued us and put us on this boat and fed us, that mirror was the first time I had seen myself in 42 days. And I like touched my face, I touched my collarbones, and it was the first time we were allowed to have it was first time I'd seen a cell phone in 42 days. And that was kind of weird. I looked at my phone and I even said, like, I had a panic attack. So I was like, this isn't my phone. And the woman that gave it to me was like, what are you talking about? And I actually kind of like freaked out because I didn't recognize my phone. I had not seen a cell phone in 42 days. And when I looked at it, I didn't think it was mine. And the apps looked weird. I just hadn't seen a cell phone in 42 days. And so we weren't allowed to make calls or anything, but we were allowed to have our phone so we could like document, take some photos. They actually encouraged us to do like some video journals. And so anyways, I hollered at one of the other guys that survived, who was right next to me. And we were like rescued and got to like be in these little huts to like recover. And I go, hey man, will you come here really quick? And I turned around and looked at him, and I was just staring at him. And he looks at me and goes, crazy, huh? And I went, yeah. Will you take a photo? And that was that face that you see was just me in shock, you know. And
yeah, the 1,000-yard stare, right, is what they call it.
Yeah, it was that 1,000-yard stare of just like, man, I had just gone through a pretty wild experience, and I went through starvation, and more than that, I went through a mental transformation that I would never fully be able to explain in even a couple hours. You know, it's like I've explained the story a few times, but I definitely learned the difference between having a why versus a how, you know, and it's talked about in a book called Man's Search for Meaning, which is Viktor Frankl, who is a survivor from the Holocaust. And he talks about like those who had a how didn't survive because you have to have a why bigger than a how. You have to have a why are you going to survive? Why are you going to go through this? And that was kind of what I learned during the journey. 25 days in, I was ready to quit. I didn't think I could do it. I was starving. I didn't want to stay. And through that journey, I found a why bigger than a how. And that's what made me stay for the 42 days. And yes, I was alone for 8 days. There was, to give people kind of the backdrop who've never seen it. And I've told the story a million times, but there was the show's never been done again. It was a one-time deal, and it was beautiful. It was amazing, but it was also, you know, never been done before. People didn't really quite understand it, and it was a documentary about. It was a social experiment to document human change and what will people go through when they're literally stripped away from the world in a very abrupt manner. We were essentially like taken from our homes, thrown in a jungle, cut off from the world. how are you going to react, you know? And so it wasn't so much about, you don't even see half the stuff I did to survive, we're spearing stingray and, catching fish. You don't see most of that stuff because it wasn't about survival. It was about human transformation, the mental aspect, the emotional side of things. And it was,
we might have to do a part 2 on that because, like you said, I mean, just the amount of questions that I do have. I mean, we're not going to be able to get to them. But I think I guess one of the biggest questions that I have for you in that situation is, would you do it again?
I would. I wish I could, man. It was the greatest, most emotional, most special experience of my life that I still have so much gratitude for today. I get emotional about it because nobody will ever fully understand what it was like to be cut off from the world, starving in a jungle, going through some pretty intense emotions, from finding some of the wrong people, finding a couple of guys that weren't necessarily the right guys to survive with, and then finding the right people, and then going back to the wrong guys. And you would have to just watch the show, and it would take me about 20, 30 minutes to explain why I went back to the other guys and then went back once again. And by the way, back and forth was 1.5 miles of water that I swam 4 different times. I swam across 1.5 miles of water on day 18, found 2 human beings. I went back to the original guys across that same 1.5 miles of water on day 22. And then on did it 3 times. And then on day 35 or 33, I swam back across that 1.5 miles of water and survived with these other 2 people until we were rescued. And you didn't know when rescue day was. You hoped it wouldn't be 2 months, but you knew it could be up to 2 months, and it ended up being 6 weeks. And then, man, there's so much to it, right? And again, I still to this day, there's almost not a day that goes by that I don't think about it. And I was a better human being, obviously, when I came home. And the struggle that I have, the thing that actually upsets me the most is losing that feeling that I had coming home, and the person that I was, and falling back into maybe the person that I don't like as much, just, because of everyday life and struggles and cell phones and, everything the distractions we have in life. But I'm so grateful that I have the tools from that experience to constantly check myself and try to be that person, and constantly remind myself of the teachings and the lessons that I had from that experience to continue that forward, if that makes sense,
Yeah, of course. And, I want to talk about the things that you just mentioned, which was contrast, where you needed to experience those people that you didn't want to work with or that you couldn't survive with. And that's when you had that gratitude. And now when those people that you could survive with, that's when you start to say, okay, well, I needed that to happen so that I can feel what good is. How can you know what good is if you don't have bad? And how can you have up if you don't have down, and those kind of things? So, and everybody that's watching right now, these things that are happening in your life, even if you may consider them bad or whatever value you want to establish or assign it to, these things need to happen so that when we do go through our lives and the good things do start to happen to us, we can be that much more grateful of everything that we do. And you just said it right now with cell phones, right? You when you went to go over there, you probably had that primal feeling and you want to get back to it. But then at the same token, what you just said and all of your stories that you mentioned, this cell phone was the reason that you were able to have all of these things. And every one of them, you said, a friend called me up. So, when it comes to that cell phones, man, I just love to hear that you kind of had that gratitude.
And I love that you bring that up. Like, I actually get very upset when people complain about social media. It's like, yes, it is a tool. And if you don't use that tool correctly, it won't benefit your life. And yes, there's a lot, especially we are living, I think everybody would agree that we're living in some of the most wild times in at least in the last 100 years. I would probably, I wasn't around 100 years ago that I know of, but but knowing the history and stories and it's like, man, we're living through some pretty crazy times. But if you use these things around us that we have for the right reasons, they bring you good things, and I got to say, social media has never done anything but really good for me, connecting me with amazing human beings and allowing me to share stories and see other people's stories. And so I use it in a positive manner. And if it wasn't for social media, I would never have known about Castaways. If I was one of those people like, I stay off social media, everything in life is a balance. I got off the phone with one of my best friends today who was struggling, who was going through a hard time. And I kind of explained these things to him as well. I said, you can't always be on the positive swing of the universe. Things are going to be bad. But as long as you're willing to embrace that and just maintain of like, you embrace it again. And it is cliche, some of these things we say, because saying and applying are very different things, right? But
oh yeah, 100%.
It is so true that when you're going through those hard times, you just have to kind of smile, which I do. I try to do, and I will be upset. I get irritated, but I usually say, there's going to be a good swing to this, and you just push through, I guess. And what kind of keeps me going in life, people always say, oh, you're so positive. It's not even that, as much as that I actually just, I maintain discipline. I maintain forward movement. No matter how bad things are, you have to keep going. I ended up saying this amazing quote, during the show, and I didn't mean to say it. It just came out. It genuinely came off the top of my head. I was like, when people ask me, why did you swim across that water and risk literally dying? I mean, the production wasn't going to let you die, but they kind of just let you do whatever. And there were sharks in the water. There's, I was starving. And I said, well, I was going to die wherever I was sitting, so I might as well die trying. So I actually still use that quote to people when they're going through a hard time and they're depressed and they're just kind of sitting around. I'm like, you're going to die where you're sitting. So why the hell not just go, move forward, do whatever it is. Even if you're having a hard time, even if you're depressed, even if you're struggling, you're going to fucking die where you're sitting. So die moving forward and trying, and guess what? You're probably not going to die. And you're going to be like, oh, wow, I thought that was my limit back there. And I crossed that line and I'm doing okay,
Man, when I tell you all this stuff that you just said is what I embody and what I live literally every day. Do you have like a Street Fighter on with your hair combed to the side and Dano is your name? Because literally, I say that all the time. I mean, think about another a classic example of somebody being in a job that they don't want to be at, right? When you constantly delay leaving that job and actually following your dreams and your passions, that time is going to pass whether you stay there or if you don't. And it's like you said, you're going to die, or if you're sitting there or moving, that same amount of time of taking that 10 years to build and learn and learn a new skill or anything that you want to do. If you take that same 10 years, it's going to be the same as if you don't and stay at that job that you're at, or that dead-end job, or that relationships you don't want to be in, or whatever it is that you're in. That same amount of time is going to pass. So might as well spend it doing what's something that you actually love and something that you're actually trying to build towards. And I say that all the time. And when I tell you that there was a video that I was watching earlier about you, and it was just talking about you were scared to come back. It was a little bit of a video series. And I was going to ask you, what those things that you were scared about. You just answered that question for me. I actually have the clip pulled up. So, I mean, we're technically supposed to go to 9:56, but we're going to go over a few minutes because this is just, I need to share this with you guys. And let me see if this is right here. So this was a little bit of a video series, of a video journey that you did going back. Wow. So let me see if this is it.
In a normal life. So I know Vegas has changed.
Oh, here it is. Here it is. I got
5 flights back to the United States. Again, where I said I'm a little bit nervous about getting back into normal life.
So you said you're nervous about getting back to your normal life, right? And one of the things that you just said in the end of what you just said was, a lot of people were scared and they make up these things in their mind. But when they go about in real life, those things that they were ever worried about never really fully happened, or it wasn't as bad as what they told themselves it was going to be. And those, like I said, everything that I have written down is what you really touched on. And what did I tell you guys? Matt was going to come on here to drop his golden nuggets, his gold bars. And I really love your attitude, and I'm really in the same alignment with you, man. And for everybody watching, like we said earlier, it is a little bit cliche, but all the stuff that we are talking about is true because we live it every day, and now we can never go back, and life is just that much amazing and absolutely beautiful. So Matt, can you tell us, we only have a few minutes left, but can you tell us about maybe any future projects that you have coming up, or what we can keep an eye out for Matt Jaskol?
Yeah, man. So I am a professional skydiver, and I've been focusing some time. Unfortunately, I'm not racing right now. And again, that goes back to nothing other than funding. It just goes back to sponsorship. My friend, Auto Parts for Less, he's still one of my best friends. He's an amazing, and some of the other supporters of mine, they just don't have the budget to just to share, since people probably ask. The budget to race one race in NASCAR with a low budget team is a minimum of around $35,000 per race. It's
Wow.
crazy. I mean, racing is so expensive, and it's hard to put together the partnerships and the sponsorship deals that allow you to race. And it is hard when you also need to be on the road making a living. So I travel for work. I work for different car manufacturers, essentially as like a pro driver, So I work for I'm going to Indianapolis in a few days to work for BMW at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And these are how you make a living. I was skydiving today. I did 8 tandem jumps today, taking people tandem. So that's like a side job of mine. And I'm doing it to build hours and be a better tandem instructor, because it's fairly new to me, even though I've been skydiving for nearly 10 years now. I have about 3,500 skydives. Last year I got my SAG card, for those who know that, the Screen Actors Guild. Terribly, there's a strike right now, so there's no work, but I'm doing more stunt driving. Like I got to work on a Mark Wahlberg movie and a Mel Gibson movie at the beginning of the year. And I'm trying to do more stunt driving because I want to do what I'm good at, and I'm not good at a lot of things, but I am good at behind a wheel, and I want to get paid for what I'm good at, and so I'm focusing a little bit more on that, but I'm never giving up on racing as much as it's just not. I hate saying it's not super realistic to be in a race car at the moment. I'm still trying. I'm working with partners and sponsors to try to be in a race car at least possibly in October here at my hometown race, which is right around my birthday. I've done it the last 2 years. And so even if it's just one race a year, just to stay out there, stay relevant, and be in a car and also do what I love. So I will be trying to race. There's also, obviously, there's potential for me to be back in a race car more full-time next year as we're working on things. But that's about it. There's nothing super, super exciting on the horizon other than just a little bit of skydiving, hopefully get back to doing some more movie production work when the strike ends, and hopefully back in a race car by the end of the year. And one thing I'd like to share to touch on really fast before we end about, just there's so many little things I could share about that experience I went through. And like I said, maybe there's a part 2, and just to echo what you said, one of the big lessons I learned is that when you are in the wrong situation, whether it's financial, professional, emotional, intimate relationship, whatever your situation is, if you're not in a good situation, it will slowly kill you physically and emotionally, not just emotionally, but physically. Like what I noticed is when I wasn't in a good environment I found they weren't bad guys. And later on, we grew together and they changed, but in the moment they weren't the right ones. And I was physically dying faster. I mean, I was stressed, I was unhappy. And because there were so few resources, it was physically affecting me. And what happens in the everyday world, again, because we have these, the phones and distractions, food, toys, games, we don't sometimes realize the situation we're in and what it's doing to us emotionally and even physically, because we have distractions, but it's slowly eating away at us. So all I would say is to be more awake and aware of what's going on and not to be distracted, to try to be aware of what's going on in your everyday life and possibly change that situation, which will, give you more life in so many aspects, and so just to echo on what you said about that was a big lesson I learned out there in the jungle. So
I love that too. And I want to echo off of that, just to piggyback. And, we can be on here talking about this stuff for hours, but a big way to do that is to live in the now. Stop worrying about the future. Stop worrying about the past. When you find happiness and where you're going to find your peace is if you find it in the now. And like I said, we actually have people commenting, please have Matt come back for a part 2. So we're going to have to make sure that happens.
I would love to.
This was amazing. Thanks, man. And, we're going to make it happen. So everybody watching, please go follow Matt on his social media pages. You can follow him on Instagram, on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, anything at Matt Jaskol. And like I said, I'm just really happy and honored. And thank you so much for being so transparent to come on to share your story to help everybody else with their personal lives, because a lot of the things that you did mention, we go through in our own lives, and it may not be behind the wheel, but it will be through the same shoes that we're wearing every day. And when we walk out that door, there's a list of things that we want to accomplish and things that might happen that we can't foresee coming. But as long as we're falling forward and failing forward, that is really one of the keys that we've come to make sure that we can live our lives that we want to accomplish, and whatever dreams that we can do, we can accomplish it. So everybody,
again,
my positivity, what's up?
Again, I love what you're doing here. And I just want to say really fast, thank you so much for letting me share my story, and for those that listened, and hopefully we'll see you again for part 2. We'll share some more.
Part 2, let's get after it. Matt, stay after just a few minutes because I want to talk to you about something. But to my positivity posse, thank you so much for being here. I hope you have a great weekend. Stay safe, and we'll see you next week for another episode of Weekly Dose of Dano TV. Thank you again, Matt. Thank you to my positivity posse. Peace.